Okay, well, good afternoon. My name is Richard Haggins. I'm the Senior Education Facilitator at Credit Canada Debt Solutions. I've come to Mohawk College today to talk about Newcomers and Money 101. It's a course on basic personal finances. We cover a variety of subjects ranging from banking to talking about spending plans. There's an important section on credit reporting, credit reports, credit scores, credit ratings, how to get your credit, how to check that. And then we finish off with a section on fraud and scams. Credit Canada is a nonprofit credit counseling service. So basically, long story short, our primary role, most of the people who work there are either counselors or support staff for counselors. And as counselors, we deal with people who, the only thing they have in common is they have some kind of financial issue, financial problem, something's going on with their finances, and they're at a point where they're willing to talk to a complete stranger about their financial issues. So that's our main job, and we get funded to do that. And anyway, in addition to that, the other thing we're expected to do is have an education department. So me and two other people, we are the education department, and we spend our mornings, afternoons, evenings, and sometimes weekends going out and talking to people about some real basic things in personal finances. Now, a couple of years ago, the province of Ontario, yay, province of Ontario, they gave us some money to put together this. They felt that it's worthwhile to actually have some kind of resource for newcomers, people who are coming into the province of Ontario, to talk about some real basic things in personal finances. So I deliver this workshop for a lot of different groups of people. Just last week, I was actually doing a variation on this for the YMCA of the Greater Toronto Area, and we were doing it as a webinar for people who are pre-arrivals. So they were all, it's what's called their Next Stop Canada program. So these are all people who are not actually in Canada yet. When I had a look at the list of people where they were actually attending the workshop from, I saw a lot of India, Philippines, Nigeria, different places around the world. Anyway, for them, I tend to start really right from the basics. But what I'll do with you, I do have the PowerPoint here, and you might find me actually skipping through some parts of it, blowing through some parts, and covering some other parts. You'll find me referring to this quite a fair bit as well. I find that when I've talked to people who are already here in Canada, the issues that people are most interested in tend to be more in the area of credit reporting, credit reports, credit scores, how to check it, what it actually means. I find that for a lot of first generation or newcomer Canadians, one thing they're surprised by is how often credit checks are done. I remember speaking to somebody pretty recently who said that he arrived in Canada 1 week, and within a few days he was talking to landlords looking for a place to live, and landlords or building superintendents were saying, by the way, we need to get permission to check your credit report. And he's thinking, well, I've been here since Thursday. You know, so how much credit do you think I actually already have? But anyway, so they're looking for any kind of evidence that you either do or don't pay bills. So that's one thing I find that people are, in some cases, pretty interested in. I also like to spend a little bit of time mentioning about frauds and scams. I find that two groups that do get victimized more than anybody else are seniors and recent immigrants to Canada. For somebody like me who was born and raised here in Canada, if my phone rings, as it did last week, and I get a message on there saying that this is Service Canada calling. Have any of you had this sort of phone call where it's like, this is Service Canada? Okay, yeah. Anyway, so somebody like me knows enough to say, yeah, right, that's not Service Canada, and hang up the phone. I find I'm talking to people who say they didn't know that, or they were getting a phone call that said it's Canada Revenue Agency, the tax man. I see some of you going, yeah, I had the tax man call. That's not the tax man. You know, the tax man doesn't call. You get these brown envelopes in the mail if it's actually the tax man. But when they say, oh yeah, you got to pay today, there is a variation on it that's mentioned in here that sometimes people who are clearly not native speakers of English will get a variation where the phone call comes in, and it's somebody who says they're calling from Citizenship and Immigration Canada. And they're saying things like, oh, you know, if you don't pay this money today, sorry, but the police are going to come and take you out to Pearson Airport, bye-bye to you. I did a workshop last year in Oakville where there was a young married couple, and they came to Canada from Vietnam. And their English was not so good. And they got the phone call one day from somebody who said they were calling from Immigration Canada. And this person had them really convinced that Halton Regional Police were coming to arrest them today and to take them out to the airport. Bye-bye, enjoy your flight back to Vietnam. Fortunately, the place they were studying English, one of their teachers heard them talking about this, or they'd asked a question. And these people were convinced that it was really the government contacting them, and it wasn't. Anyway, you can see I have lots of questions, but lots of comments and lots of stories. We have a slide here that covers the 4 areas that are in here. And as I said, I'm going to rattle through some of these very, very quickly. If you have any questions, I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end for you to go and pick my brain. But this is what the government felt they wanted to fund. This is basically, they said, talk to people about banking, basic money management, the section on credit and the section on fraud, and away we go. The banking section, I find that people who are already in Canada don't need to hear too much about this. But there's one thing I do like to comment on, that I find that first-generation Canadians pretty much, they do all their banking in banks, specifically in the big 5 banks, you know, TD, CIBC, Royal, Scotia, and BMO. It's basically, that's the only financial institutions they know about. You can kind of forget about trust companies because there's only a couple of them left and they're actually pretty small. But I do like to make sure that people are aware of credit unions as well. So credit unions are just like banks, except they are a lot smaller than banks. Some people say that credit unions are, actually I will mention that the difference between a bank and a credit union is actually something where at a bank, if you go to a bank, you're a customer. That's all you are, you're a customer. With a credit union, you're also an owner. So the day you go into a credit union, you actually have to join the credit union. You have to pay a small membership fee. And then at the end of the year, whatever profits were made by the credit union are actually paid out to the members of the credit union. So you actually get the profit from that. Some people say that credit unions, in their opinion, are friendlier than banks. Some people say not so much. If you're interested in learning more about this, I encourage people to actually visit a credit union, go in, ask for some information, ask about the credit union difference, and anyway, you might find that for you, this might actually suit your needs, or then again, you might find that no, actually you're happy dealing with a bank. So your choice. I'll mention that I keep all my money in a bank, but I know plenty of people who say, yeah, credit unions are great and wonderful. Your choice. Very, very quickly, the government did want us to mention that Canada is considered to have about the safest banking system in the world. So I know a lot of people that they come from countries where the banking system is not so safe. Anyway, there are organizations, government-run organizations, that insure the money that's actually in your bank. We haven't had a bank run, we haven't had a bank failure in Canada for so long, you just don't need to worry about it. So if you're keeping your money under your mattress at home, no, move it back to a bank. Put it someplace safe. You probably already found that as Canadians, we tend to do a lot of our banking electronically. If I use myself as an example, I have not been inside my bank's, the home branch of my bank. Apart from going to the ATM, I haven't been inside of the branch in at least 5 years. I have no reason to go to the bank because I do everything on a laptop at home. And I think I'm a pretty typical Canadian. We do everything either on a laptop or on our phone. or we do things by phone banking, whatever. Anyway, there's not necessarily any need to actually go to your bank and line up. I just want to quickly run through, for a lot of people, you take a look at the finances. I like to refer to what I just call an escalator, where money comes in, lands in the checking account, moves from checking to savings, moves from savings into investment accounts. That's what these next couple slides are about. Checking, you pay your bills out of checking accounts pay there's no interest, there's no return on that, so you want to minimize whatever you keep in there. Whatever you don't actually need right now, you move it to the savings account, and you use that to accumulate, or you hold on to money there for emergencies. When you have enough money in there, then you throw it over into investment accounts. If you want to ask me any questions later on, some people want to know a bit more about things like the Registered Education Savings Plan, which is for people's kids, the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, which is for our retirement, and we don't need to worry about the RDSP, and the Tax-Free Savings Account, the TFSA. I'd suggest that if you're planning on a longer term stay in Canada and you're thinking, okay, now how do I invest? How do I get further ahead? Take a look at your bank's website and see what they actually offer in terms of what do they do to educate people, to give people information about the world of investing. I can't speak for every bank, but the bank that I bank at, I know that within their investing side, they have what they call a practice investing account. And so it's basically, it uses live data. It's a simulation account, so it's basically, it's not real money. You open up the practice investing account, and they say, well, we're going to put 100,000 imaginary dollars in there, and we're going to give you a bunch of emails that show you how to access the site and how to gain information. And what you can do then is you can practice how to make money turn into more money. If you're good at it, congratulations, you just found your new job. If you're like a lot of other people, you find your investments kind of go like, oh. And if you're not so good, if your investments go like that, well, it's good to know that earlier on. That way you can say, okay, maybe I should let the bank actually handle my investing for me. You can judge for yourself whether you're any good at this. Once you've actually got some money to invest, pushing it into the TFSA, the tax-free savings account, and then investing it out from there. By the way, one thing I'll mention, it is called a tax-free savings account. The name is not a very good name. It should be more, we put it here, it's an investment account. So it's not something where you just put the money in there and earn 1% interest. It's something you put it in there and then you can invest it out in different ways. There's a lot more information on your bank's website. Again, I'm really encouraging people to go visit your bank's website and learn more about this. A couple of other things before I leave the banking area. One thing I think is really important for people to know about is overdraft protection. So sometimes with a student account, if you have a student bank account, if you have a time where there's not enough money in your bank account to make a payment, maybe they will or maybe they won't charge you an NSF fee. Sometimes there are special rules for student accounts. Once you're actually out of school, and you've got yourself a regular bank account, anytime that you have a payment going out and there's not enough money there to cover it, you're going to learn what NSF fees are. If you've never heard the term NSF, it stands for not sufficient funds or not enough money. You really never want to know what NSF fees are in Canada because they are really, really expensive. Right now, NSF fees at Canadian banks are running about $50 for every NSF. So if you have a time where it's rent day and you've given your landlord a pre-authorized debit out of your bank account and their bank is trying to pull money out of your bank account but there isn't enough money there, all of a sudden you have an angry landlord, you have a $50 NSF fee that you have to pay to your bank, and your landlord probably has a dishonored payment fee they're also going to charge you as well. That could be an extra $50 as well. How do you avoid all that? Overdraft protection. I don't often say to people, sign up for this, sign up for that. But when it comes to overdraft protection, if your bank ever says, do you want to have overdraft protection, here is one time I recommend that you say yes. It's just plain cheap insurance. And it's insurance against NSFs. If you're not actually using the overdraft, often there's no charge for just having the overdraft. There's a charge if you go into the overdraft. You can learn more about this at your bank, but this is something that if they offer it to you, I'm going to recommend that you say, yes, I'm going to take that. Okay, obviously you get your statements from somewhere. Bank books and mailed statements are pretty rare these days. Most people get electronic statements. The point I wanted to make here is that you are responsible, as far as the financial institution is concerned, you're responsible for actually checking your statements and verifying they're correct. Typically, they'll give you a month or 2 months to actually go and take a look at your statement. But if you don't report any kind of errors or mistakes in a timely manner, if you come back 6 months later and say, oh, wait a minute, I found a mistake on my statement from last August or last July, the bank's going to say, well, too bad, sorry, you're stuck with it. So check your statements. Safety deposit boxes, if you are interested in safety deposit boxes, it's a good idea if you have valuables sitting around. But I would suggest that if you're looking for a bank that has a safety deposit box, you're going to find that a lot of the older banks, a lot of the branches that have been in existence for a longer time will actually not have any remaining vacant safety deposit boxes. So if that becomes something that's important to you, you might want to change to a branch that's in a newer area of the city, or in the area that something is in an area that's just opening up on the edge of the city. You're probably going to find they're going to have more safety deposit boxes. There's different sizes of safety deposit boxes. The smallest one is probably about like that and about that long, with a lid that kind of flips up like that. So you can put small things in it. I have obviously one of the smallest ones, and mine cost me $62 a year for a safety deposit box. You can get bigger ones, you can get great big ones, but then they're going to charge you a lot more for those, depending on what you want to have in there. Last thing I'll mention about safety deposit boxes, they give you 2 keys. And those are the only 2 keys in existence. If you lose both of those keys, it's going to cost you a lot of money, because the bank doesn't have any extra keys. So if you say, oh, I lost both of my keys, the bank's going to say, well, we're going to have to bring somebody in here with very specialized drilling equipment, and they're going to have to drill that lock out, because there is no other key anywhere. So wherever you're keeping those keys, keep those keys really, really, really safe. Okay, how am I doing so far? I know I'm running through a lot of stuff really quickly, but anyway, this is all going to be up on the website as well. So if people want to go back and take a look at all the slides, take a bit more time. Just the last couple things about banking. Obviously you can do transfers from your bank. You can send money internationally if you need to. Talk to your bank a bit more about that. I left this slide here about paper checks and so on. There are people who still use certified checks or money orders or bank drafts, whatever. I have a checkbook. I haven't used it for years, but anyway, paper is disappearing in Canadian banking, but for some purposes it still is there, and if people are traveling, moving money internationally, that may be relevant for you. A couple things here about what if you have a problem, what do you have a complaint? You start to try to work things out at the branch, move on to the manager, and if you're not getting anywhere with it, if you're dealing with a branch and the branch just isn't dealing with you at all, and you're thinking, where do I take a complaint to? Here's a word that I find a lot of people have not heard or don't know what it means: an ombudsman. A lot of larger organizations are required to have an office of the ombudsman. And what an ombudsman is somebody whose only job is to listen to complaints, high-level complaints, and try to resolve complaints. So one time I was in a workshop and somebody said, I am having a huge problem with Scotiabank. I hate Scotiabank. I talked to the people at the bank, and Scotiabank, they don't do anything. What can we do? And so I got my phone out. I said, let's do a quick little Google search. And in 60 seconds, I had the link for the Office of the Ombudsman for the Bank of Nova Scotia in downtown Toronto. I said, here you go. Here's the link. You can go and visit the website. It lays out, okay, this is what we expect you to do to be able to have your complaint adjudicated at a higher level. So the bank's ombudsman, large organizations will typically have an ombudsman. An ombudsman isn't one person, it's an entire office. And they have a procedure for, if you want to make a complaint, they will guide you through the process for that. So if you're ever having a serious problem with a bank, visit the website and do a little search for the Office of the Ombudsman. Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments, that's a government body as well. So if you're not getting anywhere with your bank, kick it up to the government level. Before I get out of banking, one last thing. I like to mention things like payday lenders, check cashing services, places like Money Mart, Cash Money, Cash Store, whatever. These kind of places, if you can avoid them completely, please do so. Their fees are awful. If you're ever wondering how a payday loan works, basically if you need to have $500 right now and you have money coming in, they'll say, yeah, you can have your $500 right now, but a couple weeks from now you got to pay us back the $500, plus you have to pay back a 15% service charge or fee on top of that. So your $500 now turns into $575 in a couple weeks. You will find in the handouts there's a section on, we call it money management and budgeting, spending plan. Just a few comments here before I get into talking about credit reports, credit scores. When I talk to people, and I do workshops that are entirely just looking at spending plans, money coming in, money going out. I do like to comment that there are people outside Canada who seem to think that in Canada everybody is rich. I know the image comes from like media, from TV, from movies. There's times where I talk to people who are, they've immigrated to Canada and they have family back home. And their family back home thinks that somehow because you arrive in Canada and Justin Trudeau is waiting at Pearson Airport for you with your own personal money tree. And it gets kind of interesting and kind of comical when people say, I understand now, I live in Canada, I know what it's like. But my family back home, they're like, send money, and it's a couple of people I think I sort of, people like, yeah, I know how that works. And before I move on from this, there's a story I do like to mention. A while back, I met a man who he immigrated to Canada from one of the smaller countries in East Africa. So he still has a family back in his home country. I think it was Burundi, actually. But anyway, and he made the mistake of telling his brother on the phone how much he was paying for his apartment in Toronto. Now, his brother did a quick little calculation to turn, the rent into the Burundian currency. And now his brother thinks he's got to be rich because he's looking at how much he pays a month for this place. He's thinking, wow, you must have like a swimming pool and a tennis court. Because, if you were to take like 1,500 Canadian dollars and say, what would that get me for a rental accommodation in the capital of Burundi? Yeah, you'd have a swimming pool and a tennis court. And his brother's like, why can't you send more money back home? He's like, I can't send more money back home because I'm broke. And it is something, being a first-generation Canadian, that if you have to manage expectations back home, you need to be able to sort of try to paint a picture of, this is where a lot of Canadians look wealthy. A lot of Canadians look like they're doing very well. I can tell you there's plenty of people out there who, you look at their home, you think you're rich. You look at their cars, you think you're rich. You look at their lifestyle or their clothing, you think you're rich. Now, as a credit counselor, I get to look at people's bank accounts. They're not rich. You take a look, they've got a nice house, they've got a nice car, they've got a nice life, they have $2 in the bank. And that's basically money comes in, money goes out. You know that in Canada, the average household savings rate is about 1%. So you hand Mr. and Mrs. Canada $100, and they hang on to a loonie. Okay, the rest of it, out the door. And this basically is, okay, what's happening with the money? So I like to just comment on three quick things. Whatever's coming in net, we always work on net, we never work on gross. If somebody says, we're going to pay you $60,000 a year. No, they're not. That's what they tell Revenue Canada they're paying you. You take a look at what's actually left over, what's actually turning up in the bank account after taxes go out. I do really encourage people to monitor very carefully whether your income fluctuates up, down at all. Because if it is doing anything like that, you got to ask yourself, how are you dealing with the times where it's fluctuating in a downward direction? So for some people, having some kind of planning there where you've got money moving out of one account into another account so you can pull it back in again when times are a little bit not so good. I like to ask people to be really, really careful about what I call fixed expenses. Fixed is anything that it's typically there's a contract behind it, something you've signed, you've agreed to make a regular payment. It doesn't have to be the exact same amount. It can vary to some extent. But fixed it's something that if the money's not there, you have an immediate problem. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happens if you don't have the money in the money on rent day, or if you don't have the money for the car payment, or if you're driving a car with no car insurance. I have actually met people who thought it was a good idea to drive a car without paying for any insurance. If the cops stop you, that's going to be a really, really expensive day. Ontario is not a place you ever want to get caught driving with no insurance. Anyway, so whatever you've got there in the fixed area, minus that out, see what's left over, and then you've got this land of, okay, what can we do in terms of how do we manage the rest of our money here? I'm not really going to get into this too much because I want to actually bounce over to a couple of other areas. We have this in hard copy in 5 different languages: French, Spanish, Arabic, Punjabi, and Farsi. So if you speak any of those languages, or you have anybody in your family who's like, ooh, yes, my grandpa speaks Arabic or whatever, if you want a copy of this same handout in Arabic, then let somebody on the Mo Money staff know, and they'll dig through that box there and grab one. What I thought I would do in the credit reporting section, if you go to pages 18, 19, and 20, and you're going to get your quick introduction to credit. Yeah, credit reports. So somebody comes to Canada, you arrive in Canada on Wednesday. Maybe on Thursday, what do? You go down to a bank. You decide, okay, it's time to open up a bank account. Welcome to Canada. First day in Canada, you open up a bank account and you're at the bank. And of course the bank says, oh, welcome to Canada, welcome to TD Bank, or wherever. Here, just sign this form and we can get started. So they give you a long form, a terms and conditions form. I'm pretty sure if you have a bank account, you signed one of those. Did you read it? You're good Canadians already because we don't read stuff. We're just like, yeah, sign things. Anyway, so what was in there? One thing that was in there was you gave your bank permission to trade information about you and to share this with organizations called credit reporting agencies. So there's 2 credit reporting agencies that operate in Canada. And if you look at page 18, it mentions both of them, the bullet points there, Equifax and TransUnion. So if you've been in Canada for more than a few days, they already have a file that's open on you. Now, it has very little information. All it has is just what your bank gave to them. So it says it's got your name, it's got your date of birth, it's got part of your social insurance number. It'll mention that your credit was checked by TD Bank on whatever day they open up your account on. And that's the beginning of it. And then from that point, you find that over time, your report develops. And mainly what's getting developed is a rating. The entire rating scale, if you flip over to page 19 is all about your credit rating. And a rating is all about whether you make payments when payments are due or not. I tend to, this is the point where I usually pull my phone out. I have a phone, like everybody else does, I have a phone. I have a plan with Kudo. It's like Kudo phone. And anyway, so Kudo wants one thing from me. What does Kudo want from me? Money. That's all they ever want. They want money, and they want it on a predictable pattern. So Kudo and me, their deal is, Richard, we let you know what your bill payment is, and you get the money to us on or before the 23rd. That's the whole deal. So if I can remember, pay Kudo, pay them on or before the 23rd, and today we are up to the 20th, and I've already paid my bill. Yay. So anyway, me and Kudo, we are great, we are wonderful, and what that means is they're going to give me a rating, and the rating is a 1. 1 is the only good number. If you take a look at a good credit report, what you see on that report is every time there's a payment, the payment is being made, the payment is being made on time. If you dig through all the fine print in the report, you'll find they use an expression. 7 magic words. So they'll say it is paid as agreed and up to date. That's what you want to see on everything that shows up on a credit report. And every time you do something where you pay something, or you pay it as agreed, and you pay it up to date, then they're going to go, yay, wonderful, look at that. It's you did what you were supposed to do, and you did it again. And over time, this history of you making payments as payments come due, it accumulates, and it turns into a full-on credit report. It turns into a credit score. And if you're like most people, your credit score actually looks pretty good. About 80% of all credit scores are actually good, very good, or excellent. Over half of all credit scores are in excellent. So more or less, the default position is, if you can remember to make your payments on time, congratulations, your credit's all taken care of. Now, it is important for you to actually take a look and find out what's on your credit report, because Equifax and TransUnion, they don't check for any errors or mistakes or anything that's misreported. They assume that you're going to check it. And so I usually tell people, well, I always tell people, it's your job to check your credit once a year. Every year, a lot of people will do it in January, take a look at it. Does it all look great and wonderful? And one of the slides in here does mention going to Equifax and TransUnion. But what I say to people nowadays is, find out whether your bank is going to give you your credit report and your credit score for free. Because that's what a lot of banks are doing nowadays as a service to their depositors. The bank that I bank at, I use online banking. And when I log into online banking, I have it's the My Account screen. But on the side, there's a section that says My Services. And one of the services they offer, there's a link that says, do you want to take a look at your credit score and your credit report? Yeah. So you click on that. You click once more to agree to the terms, and that's it. Boom, the door is open. And the first thing that comes up is your credit score. Now, the credit score is, a lot of people, that's all they hear about is a score. So a score runs between 300 and 900. But most people are up in the 700 to 900. If you're anywhere above 700, congratulations. Plus, 700 plus is where most people are, and 700 plus basically means that you look good enough to the world that you don't need to worry any further. If you're doing something like using one credit card, using it and paying it, using it and paying it, using it and paying, your credit score will run to about 800, and it'll stop. It'll never go any higher. And you don't need to go any higher. 800 is well up in excellent territory. And you just stay there around that level for the rest of your, credit life. It never changes. Maybe it goes up a couple points every year, but that's about it. If you have a look in the booklet, on page 26, so it's pretty much at the back of the booklet, there's a logo for the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Have you heard of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre? Anybody's heard of them? Nope. Okay, well, if you have or if you haven't, one way or the other, this is part of the government, so our tax dollars pay for this. It was set up by the RCMP. They have an excellent website. I really recommend that if you want to know what's happening in fraud, visit their website periodically, because what they do is they talk about, here's what's actually going on right now. I know that last month, as we went into Christmas and New Year's, they had a link there for holiday-type scams. Now, I personally didn't have anything that I encountered, but there was a gentleman that I was speaking with recently. He is a newcomer to Canada, and he lives in an area of the GTA that has a large Chinese community. And he is Chinese himself, so he's an immigrant to Canada from China. Apparently in his neighborhood, somebody was going around during the holidays, going from door to door, knocking on people's doors and saying, hello, I'm collecting for something charity. And he had these pre-printed forms and showing the people, it's like, oh, you can donate. And they had like these check boxes. How much do you want to donate? Do you want to donate $20? Do you want to donate $50? Do you want to donate $100? And so this gentleman said that he had somebody knock on his door and basically saying, oh, yes, everybody donates to this charity. And he gave the guy $50. Actually, somebody knocking on the door, and he handed them $50. Nobody knocks on my door, because I slam the door pretty hard if somebody's knocking on my door. Certainly if they're asking me for $50 for a bogus charity, no, I'm going to slam the door very, very hard. But unfortunately, there are plenty of frauds and scams out there. When I talk to newcomers, I often say, the perception is that Canada is a very safe country. And compared to a lot of places, Canada is a very safe country. But the exception is actually frauds and scams. And again, you find that in Canada, you can't trust your phone. If your phone says the police are calling, it's probably not the police. Or if it says your bank is calling, it might not be your bank. If it says it's the government calling, it's really not the government calling. You can't trust your emails. If I'd saved every bogus email I've ever received, I would have like a stack up to here. Every organization under the sun that says, oh, Richard, oh, it's your Royal Bank account, it's your CIBC account. No, it's not. It's your BMO account. Or it's Netflix, or it's PayPal, whatever. And the phone calls that come in, the emails, the text messages, they're all things that we just need to be aware that there's a lot of people out there who think, yes, Canadians have lots of money, and because we have lots of money, then we should be sharing some of that money with other people, like the scammers. What I have in here, a couple things that the government did want us to have in here. They wanted us to mention that March is Fraud Prevention Month. Now you know we actually have a Fraud Prevention Month coming up. Most people have never heard of that. There's a couple slides in here about criminals pretending to be Government of Canada staff. They did want to have that in here because this has been a problem for quite some time. They wanted us to mention that government agencies, if somebody is calling you on the phone and they want to collect money, government agencies in Canada don't contact you by phone to collect fees or fines. They don't threaten you. They don't say they're going to deport you. They don't say they're going to threaten other members of your family. This stuff it's not happening. A lot of people have heard about the work from home and earn thousands of dollars. I think we've all seen that somewhere along the way. I work at home and I made $8,000 last month. It's like, no, you didn't. If there was really something out there I could make $8,000 a month at home, I would be at home right now working hard on my $8,000 a month. It's not real. Unfortunately, they do target newcomers to Canada with these types of scams. If you're a victim of fraud, well then what to do? And it mentions about checking your credit report, seeing what's actually on there, contacting the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. From my own personal experience, I was once a victim of fraud. I found that in my case, I filed a police report, and that made the issue with my bank went away very, very, very quickly after I had spoken to the police. I do recommend that if you are a victim of fraud, do go to the police station, file a police report. You'll get a small business card from the police officer with the police officer's name and phone number and email address and badge number and division number. And on the back, they put in the occurrence number, and that occurrence number pretty much, it indicates to everybody, yes, you really did go and talk to the police. Okay, so what you're asking there is what's referred to as credit utilization or a credit utilization percentage. If you take a look at what your credit, if you take a look at your credit card statement, it'll mention a billing cycle. It'll say, this is your credit card statement from the 15th of December to the 14th of January. So whatever your balance is between those two dates doesn't matter. But what gets reported to the credit bureau is what is your balance at midnight on the 14th, at the cutoff point. That gets reported to the credit bureaus, and it does make up part of your credit report. So what you're asking about there, for, sort of just to clarify this, what they're looking at as an indicator of if you handle your credit well. Let's say a bank gives you a credit card and has a limit of $5,000. Okay, so your limit's at $5,000 and your balance is $4,995. Does that sound safe as far as the bank is concerned? Not at all. They know that there are people who have, their risk profile is not risky or a little bit risky, somewhat risky, and then some people are out there with very risky. If you want to look like you're somebody who handles credit really, really well, keep your the ratio of limit to balance. If you're under 35%, anything under 35%, those are people who never default. They just never default. Up to about 70% is like, no, really very, very rarely defaults. Above 70%, that's where your credit score will actually start to slide if you keep your balance high all the time. If you make it visible to the world, your balance is really high. If your balance is above 90%, now you're hurting yourself. Now, when I was still actively counseling, I had a client once who came in, and he said that he'd gone to his bank to see if he could get a loan. And his bank turned him down. And he said, I don't understand why they turned me down because, you know, I always make my payments. I always make my minimum payments every month. So I said, well, let's take a look at your bills. And he had 4 different credit cards. And every one of his credit cards was above 99% credit utilized. So if they give you a $2,000 limit, you know, 99% is $1,960. Yeah, $1,960. No, hang on, $1,980 is the, so, you know, to be within 10 or 5 or $15 of the limit across all 4 credit cards, that sort of screams out, this person is having a serious problem and is very, very likely to default on their debt in the immediate future, which is what that person did. But he couldn't understand why the bank was actually able to figure out that he was that close to the edge. If your limit is here and your balance is also here, that looks just as bad to creditors as missing payments. But I like to point out that if you keep your balances low and you make your payments all the time, it just pushes your credit score higher and higher and higher. So, good enough? Appreciate you having me in. So this will go on the website now, I guess, right?
Yes.
Hello, website people.